Happy Easter, friends. Please silence your cell phones. We meet here at 4865A Cordell Avenue, Bethesda, Maryland, 20814, every Sunday at 11 a.m. for presentation of a particular topic. If every first and third Sunday of the month following this hour, we read and discuss selected writings. Today being the first Sunday of the month, we will continue with our study of the Bhagavad Gita and its notes. Next Sunday's presentation will be on the ABCs of the Theosophical path. All work of this lodge is aimed at passing on in their purity teachings of the ancient message for the masses of wisdom that HBB named Theosophy. It is left to each of us to assimilate this powerful and common sense message, thus making it a living power in our lives. By so doing, we help nature and work on with her. The voice of the silence tells us that nature will then regard us as one of her creators and unveil before us her treasures that she shows only to the eye of spirit. So each of us has a role in ushering in the golden age or postponing it with our every thought and action. Please help with your attendance on Sundays at 11 a.m. or whatever you can do in time, money, and otherwise to keep alive and thriving these uplifting teachings that are necessary for the future of humanity. We are guided by the declaration that Robert Crosby used in 1909 to launch the United Lodge of Theosophists, thereby returning the teachings to the lines laid down by the great founders through their messenger, HPB, and her staunch colleague, William Q. Judge. To this end, we work independently and with each other to achieve a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. We hold that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching. We have neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers. The sole bond between its associates is the furtherance of unity. We regard as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and we welcome to our association all those who are in accord with the purposes of our declaration and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading is from the Dhammapada, chapter 4, on flowers. Who shall overcome this earth, and who the sphere of Yama, the god of death, and who the world of happy gods, and who shall choose the steps on the path of law, even as the gardener culls the choicest blooms. The disciple will overcome this earth. Also Yamaloka, also the sphere of the gods. The disciple chooses to take on the path of law. He is the expert gardener who calls the choicest blooms. Knowing that this body is like froth, knowing that its nature is that of a mirage, and breaking the flowery shafts of Mara, the disciple passes untouched by death. Death bears off the man whose mind is intent on plucking flowers of sense, as a flood sweeps away a sleeping hamlet. The scent of flowers travels not against the wind, be it Tagara or Malika, or even of the sandalwood tree. But the fragrance of the good wafts, even against the wind, but the fragrance of the good man pervades all his ways. The fragrance of virtue is unsurpassed, even among the perfumes of sandalwood, of but lotus, of Tagara, or Vasiki. Faint is the scent of Tagara, or sandalwood. The fragrance of the virtuous ascends to the heights of the gods. Mara never finds the way to those who possess real virtue, who are vigilant, who are freed by perfect knowledge. From a heap of rubbish on the roadside a lily blooms, fragrant and pleasing. From a mass of blinded mortals arises the disciple of the truly wise one, shining with exceeding glory of his own wisdom. Okay, now for today's talk on symbolism of Easter.
The whole world, especially the Christian world, is celebrating Easter today because, as you know, Easter date is not a fixed date. It depends on the full moon and how it is set each year. This student came across in the glossary a statement that explains as to where the word Easter comes from, and we will do that first. Ostara. This is a Scandinavian word, and the word Ostara means the goddess of spring, in other words, life and light. And it's kind of a symbol for the resurrection of all nature at this time that was worshipped in the olden days. And it was a custom with the pagan Norsemen at that time to exchange colored eggs called the eggs of Ostara. So this then is the basis as to where the name Easter comes from. And of course the Easter eggs as well. We have in the celebration of Easter, Easter bunnies and also eggs. And where did that come from? We just saw the eggs belong to the Norsemen, and the Easter bunny apparently came to the United States in the 17th century with the German people who came and settled here in the United States. it says that the German settlers who settled in Pennsylvania, Dutch country, brought the Osterhaus tradition with them. And at that time, in the 1700s, when they came, and thereafter, the kids in the house used to put nests everywhere for the Easter eggs to be collected in. And later on, this gave, the tradition gave way to hats being replaced with the nests. And of course, now that has become a basket. So how did bunnies come into this season? Well, this is a time for regeneration, and we all know that hares and rabbits are very productive creatures. They have a very large litter during the spring. And it says that in the legend of the goddess Ostara, the goddess had a bird with it, and it changed it into a rabbit, and the rabbit then laid eggs and gave it to the kids that were there. But in another version of it, it says that the rabbit was her friend and constant companion wherever Ostara went, and that is how it came to be included in this festival of the regeneration season. Now, in the Secret Doctrine, there's about 350 pages designated for symbolism. And symbolism. Symbolism is necessary to understand not just what is written in the Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled, but also to figure out who we really are. Why? Well, first of all, the three fundamentals are explained in symbology first. Regardless of how many words we use, its true meaning cannot really be imparted. Second, the language of the soul is not words. It's symbols. What kind of symbols? Hieroglyphics, signs, geometrical figures, colors, all come into it. So in order to really understand our soul nature, we need to understand the symbols, not just the Secret Doctrine gives us, but also their interpretation, which is in the glossary. The glossary is a tremendous source of information. So we need to intermittently go to it to see what kind of explanation it gives. So now, if we look at the symbolism of the Secret Doctrine, what is it that we have on the first page of explanations? It's a circle. What is it? What does this represent? What does this represent? It represents the universe before it comes into manifestation. It really does not have any boundaries, but the boundary is put there so that we can understand it. I'm putting this there because we're going to talk about eggs a little bit mythologically. It's because our limited mind at this developmental stage cannot really understand the absolute. She had to put boundaries on it to give us a hold as to what it is being said. And then when she put the center here, that depicts the beginning of the Manvantara, which is an activity process. But if you go in here and open it out, what does that do for us? You know, we need to sit in that meditation room and try to understand these signs and what they are there for. If you sit in your meditation room, you're in that location. That is your center, right? And what is it that we are told? Just open it outward from your house to your community, to your state, to the nation and worldwide. That's the only way the consciousness expands, depending as to how we can include others into it. Now again, with the symbology, it is explained that the soul's journey actually occurs in the explanation of solstice and the equinoxes. So we would like to do that first before we go to the symbology, eggs, and so forth. We can circulate this, have a look at it. So during Easter then, this is, in the olden days actually it was referred as the birthday of the gods, and the great festival was that of the vernal equinox. The vernal equinox, as you know, is the springtime equinox, which is this time of the year. So then Easter is the ceremonial that crowns all of these religious festivals, regardless of where they are celebrated. It is the dramatization of the final victory of the men's long struggle through the inferior kingdoms. Easter is a commemoration of that triumph that we reach when we overcome the lower kingdoms called, they're not really enemies, but they're elementals, and they're conquered. So the ignorance in us vanishes, and peace takes its place, the internal peace. So it is a triumphant time of the year. Of course, in the religious sense, the story is the resurrection of Christ, and it holds the promise of the things to come. In the olden days, the Greeks had a term for the body, which was soma, and the tomb was designated sema. Soma, body, and sema, this is an A, tomb. Look at the similarity of it. So what is it that it is saying to us? The soul has to come into a body in order to experience life on earth and grow and expand its knowledge base. This is how it's going to free itself from the confinement of the body, because we're not really the body. We are the essence in that body, the light in it, life and light in it. We're not the body. But until that realization comes, we're kind of put in that body, and the inner life is what? It's dormant, it's not active. So the living body then is the tomb in which this divine soul is, or divine light is imprisoned. And the resurrection then indicates that the Son of divine light and truth in the springtime wakes up and takes its rightful position. So if we go to the solar symbolism that we just passed around, it is indicative of this circle of life when we look at it. And we can also look at it this way, put this at the highest point. This just shows the travel of the earth and the equator cutting the celestial circle in heaven. That is what it is depicting, but you can put it anywhere you wish in this configuration. Sun being the center of the life. And in all of the mythologies of the world, the sun represents the spiritual side of nature, and the moon represents the physical side of nature, and it is the same with us. But with this difference, the moon in the secret doctrine is specifically stated as being the mother of earth. In other words, humanity developed on the moon chain first, and then when the energy of the moon chain was transferred to the Laya point and developed for further use, then came our solar system, which is where we are today. So this path of the divine soul then starts in physical manifestation first. So the mind is the incubator, so to speak, for the soul that is coming in, because that divine ideation is what really comes into it here. So the divine mind is at this station of the zodiac of June 21, which is the summer solstice, as you all know, and it is the highest point in that celestial circle, the celestial arc. So the mind is completely detached from matter at that state, meditating in all of its purity. From June to September, it is coming in downward it's going to come into incarnation, crosses the line of separation between spirit and matter, and becomes incarnated in a material body. So the soul's immersion in that body has to reach an equilibrium for it to bring consciousness into function. This is what it is achieving. From September, November, December, October, November, December, this is the path of the sun. The seed, which is the human soul, sinks its roots in deeper and deeper into matter. On December 21, which is the winter solstice, it has reached the lowest point, which is described as the nadir in the secret doctrine. So, December 21, the soul has reached the turning point, at which time the energies that were stored potentially in the seed form feels the quickening power and begins to stir into activity. So, at the winter solstice of the cycle, the process of involution of a spirit into matter comes to a standstill. This is just what the solstice means in relation to the sun. So, this is the solar symbolism which is depicted. So, this involution then is immersing into matter, soul being immersed into matter in a downward motion, but then that downward motion, which was outward and inward, becomes tangential and starts to rise again to a high point. Okay, so and this journal activity then comes into fruition about March, when the nature actually exhibits it on the outer plane, because we can visibly see it in nature. On this date, then the soul, in a burst of light, springs out from the tomb of flesh, of death, and it is stated that it is giving resurrection from the dead. Resurrection. Resurrection from the dead. So, and we will talk a little bit about this resurrection and its symbolical meaning. So the primitive Christians in the first 3.5 centuries actually celebrated the birth of their Savior on March 25th. But this custom was changed by Pope Julian II in the year 345 AD and was shifted to December 25. And this decree stated that it was fitting that the Christians should be in accord with the custom of the followers of Mithra and of Bacchus, who celebrated the rebirth of their solar deity at the winter solstice. Now, we have a lot of references in the secret doctrine to these names, Bacchus and which is, we are told in the explanation, is the same as Osiris of Egypt, and his life and significance belong to the same group as to other solar deities. And all of these solar deities were sin-bearing, killed and resurrected. She refers to Attis of Phrygia, Osanius or Baldur, and the Syrian Tammuz, which is the Adonis. So all these names represent the same thing. They are different names, but the idea behind them is the same. So this quickening of winter at the winter solstice, with the birth of the vernal equinox, the aura of symbolic thought. Each one of the 4 points of the zodiac, the equinoxes and the solstices, can be regarded as a birth. This birth is exemplified with the Christian celebration of the Savior's birth in December, and which was changed from March to December to go with the other solar deities, and of course now it's the resurrection. If we go to Ecclesiastes in the Bible, we find this statement: the body returns to dust, but the soul to God who gave it. St. Paul in Corinthians chapter 15 verse 35 says, some men will say, how are the dead raised up, and with what body do they come? And the apostle then answers the question. It is sown a natural body. It is raised up a spiritual body. Since flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, the soul must be resurrected in a body of imperishable ethereal substance which will not dissolve with that of flesh. Thus the inner body of rarefied essence shares existence with the other body until the resurrection. So what are these principles we are talking about? Because we cover these all the time. Can we take this off? Well, we talked about symbols, and here it is. The spirit, the spiritual soul, buddhi, atma buddhi, manas, mind, works in 2 different ways. Here's the link here, and the quaternary. Now, this is what the Ecclesiastes in the Bible in Corinthians is referring to. It is not explained, but in the secret doctrine it is. So we need to understand who and what we are, and the symbols. Do we really understand what that triangle stands for? And do we know how the quaternary works? Because all our emotions, senses that we use are in the quaternary. They don't belong to the higher echelons. And this is what we deal with all the time on this plane. So St. Paul tells us the evolution of the upper 3 is made possible by their ability to transmute into the likeness of their own glorious bodies. So again, theosophically minded apostle tells us the truth of the ancient science in saying that we are reborn in a radiant spiritual body as we die unto the old heavier bodies of matter in which Mother Nature gave us for physical birth. So this is the symbology of it right here. So the resurrection body is the body of the infant Christ in us, which every third thought, word, and deed of kindliness, graciousness, love, brotherhood, shines ever increasing beauty, but the selfishness, the personal aims that we have, that brutal motive of more and more for ourselves makes that flicker really low. So that the resurrection body is that body whose essence will transform all the gross elements of sensuality and brutishness into this beautiful flame of love, which shines and makes everything bright around us. So, when we talk about immortality, this is what we need to realize, that this higher triad, or Atma Buddhi Manas, is our immortal three constituents. And at resurrection, it goes to its sphere of existence. It doesn't disappear, because we're going to come into rebirth and assume the lower quaternary again and again and again. What we need to remember is that everything that we perfect in one life is retained, because there's an article called the Sutratman, where it's, I think, HPB article, where it is explained that the aroma of that life that is spiritual is retained in that Sutratman, and the Sutratman goes from life to life to life, and it makes the simile that each life is like a bead on that string. So, what about the astrological significance of Easter, which is a movable date, we said at the beginning? It is not a fixed date on the calendar. Actually, it is stated in the writings that it can fall on any Sunday between March 22nd and April 23. The date of Easter actually has a reference to the celestial orbs that give light to Earth. One is during the day and the other one at night. The daytime, the sun, and at night, the reflected light of the moon. It is stated here that Easter is fixed to fall on the first Sunday coming on or after the first full moon occurring on or after the vernal equinox. And that is set at March 20 or 21. So it is not fixed, and this is the guiding explanation as to when it occurs. So the sun referring to the divine spiritual, and the moon referring to the earthly physical nature. The deep secret of the entire explanation has been buried under these superficial explanation, and its real meaning forgotten by most of humanity. So, the union of the two great celestial bodies, in other words, the marriage of the moon and the sun, or the physical body and the spiritual entity within it, comes to the end of that pregnancy that the full moon shows at the end of 28 days. The full moon represents the complete coverage of the body of the moon with the solar rays, which means that its divinization is complete every 28 days, the end of that pregnancy, the mother who is ready to deliver her child. Now, the Christian scripture says, "Thy whole body shall be full of light." And this child of soul and body creation, personalized by Horus in the ancient Egyptian dramas, exultingly exclaims this statement: "My whole body is filled with light. There is no part of me that is not a god. I am divine in every part." And Saint Paul states, "If the Christ be not risen, then our faith is in vain. For if the Christ be not risen in us, risen out of the pettiness, ignorance, instincts of our brute nature, then indeed is our faith in the resurrection vain and empty. If he be not risen in us, then truly we have no stake in that resurrection. Without this transformation in our own natures, we keep the Christ still bound in his death body, which we call the tomb, which is our mortal body." And Jesus in the Gospels: "Unless a grain of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit." Saint Paul clinches the interpretation of the seed being planted in the soul, dying, and then new life springing up from it by stating, "For as in the first Adam all die, even so in Christ the last Adam shall all be made alive." All spirit then gives its life, goes to its death to uplift the physical creation below its level. "Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away." The Song of Solomon. This adjuration to rise up and come away is addressed to the divine sun soul in men, when the day of that final victory and release from the bondage from this bodily tomb will come, and the voice of God shouting through his creation bids the soul come forth and greet the morn in this everlasting triumph. Now, I kind of ran out of time, but I wanted to reference the eggs, the Easter eggs. HPV has a lot of references to the egg in the Secret Doctrine, and we'll just mention a few of those, and we'll open it for questions. She tells us that the mundane egg was one of the most universally adopted symbols, highly suggestive as it is, equally in the spiritual, physiological, and the cosmological sense. Therefore, it is found in every virile theogony, where it is largely associated with the serpent symbol, the latter being everywhere in philosophy as in religious symbolism, an emblem of eternity, infinitude, generation, regeneration, and rejuvenation, as well as of wisdom. The virgin egg is the microcosmic symbol of the macrocosmic prototype, the Virgin Mother, chaos, or the primeval deep. The male creator, under whatever name, and we gave the names earlier, springs forth from the virgin female, the immaculate root fructified by the ray, who is versed in astronomy and natural sciences, can fail, she says, to see its suggestiveness. Cosmos, as receptive nature, is an egg fructified, yet left immaculate. Once regarded as boundless, it could have no other representation than a spheroid. The golden egg was surrounded, she says, by 7 natural elements: ether, fire, air, water, 4 ready, 3 secret. it may be found stated in Vishnu Prama that these elements are translated as envelopes. So this is on page 65 and 66. You can also read it for yourselves, because the egg is a tremendously unique emblem, in the sense that it has life in it that germinates and develops in the egg, and then the chick pecks and comes out of it, which is also represented during this time of the spring equinox, this regeneration of life, in other words. And the egg is the best emblem or symbol for it. And you can read a lot more about it in the Secret Doctrine. Now we'll open it for questions. Yes?
We sorely need such an uplifting message as this, while we are here in our gross bodies, in this muck yuck of the world, trying to get through it. It's very uplifting, and it's hard to see it on a day-to-day basis, because you talked about one cycle of a year there, We grow over eons and eons of time, and over millions of years. So if we could see that picture, we would see what you just presented today in a few minutes, I think. And are you seeing that too in your study of your philosophy?
Yes, definitely. But the key is that the soul be awakened as we go through the cycle that we just described, because this emancipation or removal of ignorance cannot come by forcing someone to accept ideas from the outside. The soul has to awaken to its inner life itself. And in all of the statements in this philosophy, it is stated that conversion to this philosophy cannot occur because one cannot understand it until one is awake on the inside. Having said that, the importance of the fundamentals come here into it, because unless we have cycles, which is described as a circle of life, or tail and the snake biting its own tail, which is not a very good drawing, but this is, we talked about this, a snake swallowing its own tail, which represents eternity, quite a few times. So unless we understand cycles, that everything is cyclic, that the cycles repeat themselves, not only in 1 year, which actually this diagram is important to understand in the sense that it correlates with a lot of the stuff that the Secret Doctrine tells us, because she has in there the hierarchy of Diane Chauhan's, and she tells us a lot of information about our world in explaining how those beings give of their essence to nature and to man himself. So the cycle contains in it karma, karma being the law. It's law that encompasses the whole circle. We're under its sway up to Brahma, and this is Brahma's egg. In the Secret Doctrine, we call it Brahma's egg. That's whole universe, okay? Brahma's egg. So unless we have an inkling as to karma, that this law is the nature's law, it's not human law. Karma has a sway in all of human life, as well as in cyclic fashion, bringing that nature to a higher expression of itself. It continuously is at work. What's the other part of this? This resurrection is dependent on reincarnation. how would we perfect ourselves and resurrect that spirit which is dormant and imprisoned in a tomb, our physical body, in other words? How would we do it without reincarnation? We all know that in Kali Yuga, the average life cycle is 70 years. As we are now going towards 100 years because of the medical advances perhaps, and living better maybe, 70 years to 100 years is the highest we can have. This is our, each incarnation is that. So how would we, in this short life period, achieve that feat that we just explained in one circle of the equinoxes and the solstices? Of course, everybody knows what the equinoxes are. They're the 2 days of the year when the equator passes the celestial and cuts it into two. Day and night are of equal duration. So how would we realize this understanding without actually applying it to our own lives? It takes a lot of courage at this stage to actually stay the course because of the difficulties we encounter in our social circumstances. This being the effect of all and everyone's karma, because we have individual karma, but we don't live our lives individually, in the sense that we are in association with a lot of others in our daily environment. We come into contact with a lot of people as we go through life, and their karma and our karma to some extent crosses, because we influence others and they influence us. And if the other entities around us are not at the point of soul awakening, they're not aware of this at all. They just live a mundane life from day to day, all involved in the material side of nature. They're not awakened to their inner spiritual side yet. So the writings specifically say that most of our difficulties in following this philosophy comes from a lot of our fellow beings not being awakened. In fact, this might not be very complimentary, but HPB in one of her articles calls 2/3 of humanity being in that state, that only perhaps out of the 1/3 the neophytes are going to actually pick up this path and decide to walk on it. What does the Gita say? In 1 million? So this is the age, dark age, but as we said at the beginning, it is each of us that is going to bring the golden age in, because we cannot allow the circumstances just to carry on in this manner. The future of humanity is dependent on it. And then, of course, the other aspect of it is that the Atlanteans had reached a very high civilization, but nevertheless they sank under the Atlantic Ocean, and we stand in the same position to them. We also can sink. It is up to us to uplift or sink it. So, yes.
And so to that point, I think it's important to have uplifting thoughts and not get caught up in quote-unquote makyak and not pay attention to it in terms of your thoughts and your actions. So that's why it's advised to study the philosophy as much as you can. All your thoughts need to be in it, with it at all times, at all situations. So I'd follow up with having a positive attitude, a can-do attitude, and not be discouraged by anything.
Yes. Actually, this article we just read in the Dhammapada has a very good suggestion. and we should read it. That is very true. Positive attitude uplifts everything, and a smile can make a tremendous change to someone's day. But by the same token, we cannot be ostriches and sink our head in the sand and not know what is going on around us. You need to be aware as to what is going on, because if you are not, you cannot help change it. And change is necessary for this age we live in. Where we read the flowers, it says, the bee gathers honey without injuring the scent or the color of the flower. So should a silent one, someone in our words who's following this path, live his life. Not the unworthy actions of others, and this is your statement, not the unworthy actions of others, nor their sins of omission and commission, but his own acts of omission and commission should one regard. In other words, we're not responsible for what other people do or say, but we certainly are as to what we do and say. So if we are full of hope for the future, full of energy to do the right thing at all times, to the best of our ability, that is all that is expected of us, says Mr. Judge.
And that's the only way you can attract similar, like-minded, like-hearted people. If you're, concerned with the darkness all the time, that's how you're going to be feeling and thinking. So just embody that at all times as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So that hope and that energy that the future holds is dependent on us, as said before. So our own thoughts have to be positive, but it doesn't mean that other people don't try to pull into their negative attitude all the time either, because they do. But you have to give help to those who are in those situations, because what does she say? Bad, good, or otherwise, we're all in the same pot. If someone comes with a negative attitude and asks for your help, you are still obligated to help them. But don't assume their position in life. Hold on to your center. In other words, go out and do what you need to do. You are in the world, but not of the world. So that is very well spoken. Thank you for your comment. Yes?
Now, in connection with what we just said, the law of karma in reincarnation, which was well known in the time of Jesus, Jesus taught reincarnation.
Correct.
The karma being responsibility, reincarnation being hope. And could you kind of mention, you talked about Kali Yuga and the time that we're in now. We are ushering in, or working to usher in over yonder time, the golden age, and also just to comment a little bit about the reincarnation, how many lifetimes we're talking about here, many, right?
Mm-hmm, correct.
Not just a few times.
Okay.
It's hard you can't wrap your head around it, but at least we need to try to understand that.
Okay. First of all, when you look at the Earth chain from its beginning to the evolutionary process it has gone through on globe A, B, C, and we are now on D, and we have now circled around. In other words, we have passed the midpoint, and we're circling around towards a spirituality. That you have to also hold in your mind, that many ages have gone by on Earth, but the calculation is very difficult. However, some hints are given here and there, and we're told that we have been separated into male and female, and then men and women for 18 million years. That should give you a hint as to the period that we have already gone through. And not only that, in the secret doctrine we're told that we were sweat-born, we were egg-born. She says, I'm terribly sorry to say this, but we were egg-born at one time. And then the Pitar fathers gave their chaya, and we're now placental-born. But we obviously have gone through a tremendous amount of change in the third race. And remembering that and what has come out of that into the fourth race, and what the fourth race did, even though their spiritual eye was open, they knowingly committed crime, in other words. But it was a necessary process that we have just described, the soul crossing that line of mental purity and incarnating in material substance, in other words. And you have to have that experience, but it eclipses as we descend more and more into material existence. Our spiritual is eclipsed. And in the Secret Doctrine, again, you can read it, I think it's on 272, very marvelous explanation is given as to humanity's division at that time. One went white way and the other one went the black way. But the black way is just materialistic. But look at the consequences of it. So, as the other students said, remembering karma and reincarnation, and that as humanity at this stage, we have been in this development at least 1 million years, you can then figure out, considering 100 years for an incarnation, which was even less earlier, and 12 to 1500 years for a rest period, you can divide it and figure it out for yourself in that just 1 million year as to how many times you have come and gone. Now, following the positive aspect of this philosophy, those who are awakened have the responsibility to awaken others around them, not by force, but by similitude, as the student said. Telepathically, we can connect others who are of similar minds. And in this age, when you look around, this is a transition age, which means that it's in fluctuation, constant fluctuation, transition. This is a transition age, constant fluctuation. But remembering also that that transfer from the moon chain to the earth chain is in a orderly manner. The most developed comes to A when they have done their developmental stage on A, they move to B. And then the earth chain sends the next group on to A. Considering that humanity, all of humanity is not at the same place of development. There are spiritual nations on earth at this time. If you look at all around the world, you can figure it out for yourselves, because all nations do not value material substance. All nations do not value material substance. Yeah. Material substance is not valued everywhere as it is in the modern world. And now movements are coming out saying that we need sustainable energy, we need sustainable lifestyles. So there is that movement towards that base root again as to how to use nature beneficently and not plunder her. And we can be part of that movement, moving towards the sustainable aspect of life and not support the other side of it. So we can make these changes wisely.
Jesus said, you can do greater things than I. I think this is kind of what he meant. He doesn't mean we can do it in one lifetime, but if we keep at it and through our own self-induced and self-devised methods, we have the opportunity to become perfect.
Correct. Because he came to uphold the law. and show the way to others. Just because humanity could not understand his ethics and philosophy and made it anthropomorphic, that doesn't mean that that is what he taught at the beginning when he came. And so that is exactly what he meant. If we can do greater things than him, that means that we're of the same essence. We are human. We're all the same. The only difference is in degree. Degree. And we just said we are not all at the same place. So as we move towards our spirituality embodied in us and give it out from that perspective, this is it. This is how we get emancipation and perfection are actually synonymous terms in this philosophy. Thank you.